Welcome back to the Data-Driven Supply Chain series. In Chapter 1, we covered the key fundamentals of supply chain, and also went into detail about the basic framework a typical supply value chain should follow. We're getting into Chapter 2, where we're going to detail our case study, through which we're going to demonstrate, in detail, how a business can turn their existing supply chain setup into a highly effective, business-benefiting, operations and cost-optimized, data-driven supply chain ecosystem that directly supports the business's core strategy and helps the business reach a healthy bottom line. Let's get into it. So our case study is a business called the Food Corner, which has a core mission that is two-pronged, the first prong of which is to afford economies of scale benefits to consumers and small businesses in the sourcing of food items such as non-perishables like grains, legumes, produce, and meat products, resulting in lower purchase costs for the consumer or small business, regardless of the size of the order. They do this by pooling orders regionally, in pods of communities, thus turning a mountain of small order quantities into substantial quantity orders that would offer up economies of scale discounts that the small order individually would not, by any measure, be able to achieve. This way they are able to offer up lower prices than mainstream food wholesalers and retailers. The other prong involves giving market access to small-scale and other non-mainstream farmers and food producers. These are businesses who typically struggle to access formal distribution and retail channels, for whatever reason. They could be lacking the financial muscle, production capacity, or the required relationships to compete with larger or mainstream players, or battling some type of protectionist or discriminatory practices that are making it difficult for certain farming or food production business owners to access mainstream food supply and retail channels. So essentially on the consumer side, the business is targeting bulk orders from regular consumers for everyday food consumption, as well as for events, such as weddings, funerals, and so on. Certain types of communities in given regions and countries are known to be prone to having large-scale weddings or funerals, either for traditional or cultural reasons, where a large number of guests show up to either support or celebrate with the hosting family, making substantial food and refreshment provision necessary. Such events typically come with a list of other costly needs, so saving money and managing the budget tightly becomes an important aspect of the event, in order for the hosting family and associated parties to be able to cover the full costs of the event. Furthermore, food provision is often the first or second most costly item on the event budget, making any cost savings on food impactful to the overall budget of the event. The availability of various food items that are particularly geared at bulk pantry stocking and community-type targeted event food sourcing means that customers can source most, if not all of their food needs, with one order, from one business that can source inputs from multiple suppliers at competitive prices. A community that consumes a lot of mutton, based on cultural or religious reasons, would typically source variations of specific food items, both for daily consumption, as well as for events, especially if those events are for specific traditional, cultural, or religious celebrations, be it holidays, weddings, funerals, baptisms, coming-of-age celebrations, and so on. Every region or area will have predominant profiles of communities, so it should be straightforward to predict the type of food items that would predominantly be in demand from the community pods, in specific areas or regions. The main driver of the consumer side of the business is customer acquisition, and not necessarily monetization. However, where the opportunity exists, perhaps due to overproduction, or where there is spoilage risk, markups present a revenue opportunity. The main target customer on the B2B side of things is small businesses, both on the sourcing and supply sides. On the sourcing side, that is, the customer type that is sourcing food items, the business is mainly targeting caterers, hospitality establishments, restaurants, and food retailers. The main value proposition is essentially the same as the one for consumers, which is economies of scale-driven cost savings. Non-chain restaurants, B&Bs, boutique hotels, as well as caterers whose core customer base is individual consumers, often do not have the bargaining power with food suppliers that would allow them to source food items at prices that help them achieve input cost optimization for their business. They often don't have much in the way of business scale and status, and they often are not able to reach the order sizes that qualify for notable and budget-impactful order discounts. In their case, the required order quantities would simply not make sense for their businesses, demand and cash flow-wise. The other type of customer within this target customer group is mom-and-pop community retail stores, often referred to as the corner shop in many markets. These businesses also tend to not have the scale and financial muscle that competitors such as large chain supermarkets do. These community-focused, localized, and often informal establishments often offer the type of customer service that large chain supermarkets cannot offer, such as informal and flexible credit solutions, small quantity food retailing such as half loaves of bread, and pantry augmentation type selling, where customers can bring their own containers and buy as many cups of flour, sugar, or rice as they need, especially in low-income communities, where consumers tend to get financially overstretched towards the end of the month. They are also able to do so in a dignified manner, because the owner typically knows community members very well, and is able to accommodate their needs without judgment, which the community repays by being trustworthy and paying their debts on time. All these small businesses are able to get the food items they need from one place, and can even make requests for certain specific items that wouldn't typically be available in large quantities from mainstream retailers. On the supply side, that is, the small businesses from which the food corner sources pulled food items for order, are the farmers, as well as other types of food producers, such as manufacturers. These businesses are able to access a wider market at any yield or production level. They can do so without having to worry about the challenging, expensive and often impossible expectations of mainstream distributors and retailers, who are typically hostile to new, smaller, status quo disrupting outsiders. They are also able to access higher demand for their outputs, because they are not limited to selling within their immediate vicinity, area or region. They can access markets in other areas and regions, where demand for their yields and outputs might actually be much higher due to the difficulty in growing the required items, or the sourcing of inputs to manufacture the items that are high in demand. This market access is worth paying a small monthly subscription and sales commissions for, where appropriate.